Standard library function is what? That comprises a built-in function which is already predefined function. We are going to write a set of code or set of instruction in order to perform a particular task. But why we are having this function? We have to specify a name of a header file within the angular brackets. Everything is not considered as a single unit. Instead of that, we are going to make a division of as a sub-programs or a sub-problem. Hello everybody, welcome to the first session on chapter 12, that is functions. I am Rohini TS from the Department of Computer Science, Vidhyaashram Pre-University College, the Temple of Excellence, Mysuru. So in the first session of this chapter, we are going to discuss regarding the blueprint as well as some of the content in this session. So if you consider the blueprint of this chapter, so you are going to get only one question, that is from 2 marks. So that you can expect 2 marks question from this chapter, and it will be for totally 2 marks. Then what are the content that I am going to discuss in today's session? So we are going to learn about the introduction part of this functions. That means what do you mean by function, why we require this, and what are the types we have. That and all I am going to discuss in my today's session. So I am going to do with this introduction part, as well as we are going to learn about the types of function. So when we consider the types of function, it will going to have library function as well as the user defined function, and also we are going to learn about the different header files that we are going to use in our program. So let me get into the today's session, that is regarding the introduction part of this function. So if you just recall the characteristics of C++, mainly why we are going to use C++, that is moreover it is an object-oriented programming concept. So it will going to deal with a object-oriented programming concept. Mainly it deals with a modularity. That means we are not supposed to consider any problem as a single task. So instead of that, it needs to be divided into number of sub-problems or a sub-task. Then we have to find a solution for each sub-problem or a sub-task. Then it will going to perform some of the operation for a particular task. At last, it will going to return some value. So that is what the main thing that we are going to learn with the characteristics of a C++. But when we are using this function is also going to allow us in order to divide the task or divide the program into number of sub-programs, and each sub-programs will going to be perform particular task, and at last it will going to return some value, or it will going to return the resultant back to the main function. So that is what the reason we are going to use this function. So here you can see the definition of function. Function is a named group of statements. It is also set of statements or a sequence of statements developed to solve sub-problem and return a value to the other function when it will be called. So this function is nothing but it is also sequence of statements or a set of statements, and mainly it is going to be developed in order to solve a sub-problem, and it will going to return a value back to the main function where it is called. And we are going to use this function when the programs are complex and lengthy. So instead of dealing with a single program which is of complex and lengthier one, instead of that we are going to make it as some of the sub-problems or a some of the sub-programs, and each program will going to have a set of statements, and each statement together we are going to make that as a particular function, and that will going to perform particular task. At last it will going to return a value. So let me consider one example. I just wanted to find the addition of two numbers. So let me consider a plus b. So for this I just wanted to write a program. So at that time it may comprises of any number of codes. So it may comprises of 5 to 6 lines of code. At that time we are going to call this as a sub-program. We are going to call this as a sub-program, and after performing some of the calculation or after performing some of the operation, it has to return some value. So it has to return some value, and that function should have some name. So that is what here we have a set of instruction which is going to perform particular task. That is what we are finding the addition of two numbers, and it will going to return some value back to the main function where it is called. So that we are going to use these functions. So in order to reduce the complexity of a program, so or in order to reduce the lengthier program into number of sub-program. For that purpose we are going to use this function. So here you can see that if the programs are complex and lengthy, they can be modularized. So I can make it as a different modules, and if I am going to consider another program or a sub-program, it will going to perform another operation. So each of the function will going to be unique in nature and can be modularized into sub-program. That sub-programs are called as functions. So we are going to call these sub-programs as a functions. Then what are the types of functions we have? So we have two types. Very important question. Mention the types of functions. So it has two types. One is library function. Library function is also called as built-in function, or library function is also called as built-in function, and second category is user-defined function. So totally it has two types. So now we'll see about this library function or a built-in function. So as we all know that function is mainly what a set of sequence of instruction which will going to perform a particular task, and at last it will going to return some value back to the main function or a function which is called. That is what function is all about. So if I am going to consider this library functions or a built-in functions, so here with the help of compiler already the set of instruction has been developed and it has been tested, everything is ready. Main thing is what? We just need to use that in our program. So if you remember the clear screen, that is what? CLR, SCR. So what is this function will going to do? So if you just recall the previous sessions examples and all, there we have used a clear screen function. So I am specifying function. So what is the use of having this clear screen? Mainly it will going to clear the screen which is of the previous program's output. So whatever the previous program's output that we have in a system, if I wanted to delete or if I wanted to erase all those things, then we are going to use this clear screen. So that is what? CLR, SCR. So in order to get this CLR, SCR in our program, so this clear screen function, in order to work, we have written n number of codes for this clear screen function. So that is also considered as what? Function. So in my new program, instead of writing n number of lines code which is related to this clear screen, I am simply using this CLR, SCR. So behind this CLR, SCR, we have n number of code in order to erase the content of a previous program's example. For example, you just consider, I just wanted to find the addition of two numbers. Okay, I just wanted to find the addition of two numbers and it is of what? 5 to 6 lines of code. And I just wanted to clear the screen of a previous program's output. So consider that may comprises of 50 to 60 line. 50 to 60 line. So you just imagine if I wanted to perform addition of two numbers, it require only 5 to 6 lines of code, as well as I just wanted to clear the previous output's screen. So that may requires this clear screen function that comprises of 50 to 60 line of code. So is it look any compatible or is it look nice of having this 50 to 60 lines of code in order to run only 5 to 6 lines of code? No. It is of what? Waste of time, and we have to do it in from the scratch. So instead of that, I'm just going to use this CLR, SCR function that is already developed, that is already tested, and everything has written, everything has been developed. So there is no errors, no bugs in that. So we are just simply using that. So in order to use that functions, there will be a privilege. That kind of function will be termed as what? Library function. Library function is also called as built-in function. No need to write a code for that already developed function from the scratch. So instead of that, we are simply using that function in our program. So then what is the definition of this library function or a built-in function? That is, standard library is a collection of predefined function. Very important word. It is predefined function. So as I said, if I just wanted to use that function, then no need to write that program or no need to write that sequence of instruction from the scratch, and no need to test, debug, nothing is needed. So that is what predefined function, and other programming elements which are accessed through the header file. So if I wanted to have the CLR, SCR in my program, then it is mandatory to include a header file called conio.h. Okay, that is what I am going to discuss in my further session. So here Standard library function is what? That comprises of built-in function which is already predefined function. No need to write from the scratch. So everything has been developed. It is like what? Instant use. Everything has been developed and tested. So just need to use that. That is what? Predefined function and other programming elements which we are going to access with the help of this header file. So then what is the use of having this header file? This header file mainly will going to contain the standard function that we are going to use in our program. Then how we are going to write the header file? That too with the help of preprocessor directives. That is what? --include. After that, we have to specify a name of a header file within the angular brackets. We have to write the header file name and .h that specifies the name of a header file, and each header file will going to include several set of predefined function. So for example, if I just wanted to use this clear screen, that is CLR SCR, at that time for me it will be mandatory to include this conio.h. So for that, --include conio.h. So if I am including this header file called conio.h, at that time it will going to allow us to use this CLR SCR in our program. That is what the usage of having this library function or a built-in function or a standard library function. So next we'll see the next type, that is user-defined function. So if you consider a library functions are a standard library function, there I just wanted to use the function which is already defined, that will be designed by the compiler. So we can't make any changes to that header file, so we have to use as it is. But what if I just wanted to modify my functions? What if I just wanted to modify the sequence of instruction? I just wanted to add something, I just wanted to remove some instruction from that particular function, then there will be no privilege in the library function. But when I'm going to write a user defined function, so here also we have a function, that is what? It is a sequence of instruction which is in order to solve a particular problem. So after doing some of the calculation, it will going to return the value back to the main function from where it will be called. But in this user defined function, here also we are going to write a set of instructions. So we are going to have a sequence of instruction which is mainly used to perform a particular task and mainly used to solve a particular problem. At last it will going to return some value back to the main function. So this will going to be right as per the requirements of a user. So if I wanted to use a library functions or a built-in function, then I have to use the header file. So if I am not using --include conio.h in my program, then I cannot include CLR SCR in my program. Then that will going to encounter the error. But if I wanted to use the user defined function, then no need of depending on anything. So the user defined function is also called as independent programs. So user defined functions are defined as a independent program here, okay, and which will not going to be depends on any of the header files, or it is not going to be depends on any other thing. So we can use it in the main program, or we can use it with the help of any of the sub program. So we'll see the definition of this user defined function now. So if I wanted to create our own functions or a sub problems in order to solve the problems, so if I wanted to have my own functions or a sub programs in order to solve any kind of a problem, then we are going to call that kind of statements or a set of statements as a user defined function. That is known as what? User defined functions. So here mainly user defined function is what? It's a complete. So as per my requirements, we are writing that function. For example, if I just wanted to find the addition, subtraction and multiplication of two numbers, I can have all the operations together as a single function. And you have to understand one thing, why we are going to use this function. So we are going to write a set of code or set of instruction in order to perform a particular task. But why we are having this function? Because frequently used calculations or a frequently used operations will going to be written as a function. So for example, addition of two numbers, subtraction of two numbers, multiplication, that is what in any kind of operation, those are all the frequently used operation. So instead of writing a code for each time, instead of that, I can simply use this function which is already available, which is already defined by the user. then it is what? Complete program and complete sub-program, and it is of independent program. So, which can be used by the main program or by the another sub-program. Then it no need to depends on anything. That is the main usage of having this user-defined function. So, here user-defined functions are written to perform definite calculations. We are going to write the function. Anyway, we are going to write the function in order to perform a particular task. That is what we are going to write it in order to perform a definite calculation. After that calculation, it will going to send back the result. Where it is sending? It is sending to the calling program or a sub-program. So, if you are calling someone, they have to answer. I am getting the result back from the sub-program. That is what we are doing in the user-defined function. Okay. So, we got to know that functions are either user-defined functions or library functions, mainly used to reduce the complexity, and it is mainly of modularized things. So, everything is not considered as a single unit. Instead of that, we are going to make a division of as a sub-programs or a sub-problems. And at last, after the calculation, it will going to perform some of the result back to the calling functions or a main function. So, we'll see the things regarding the header file. If I just wanted to use any of the predefined function, so if I am saying predefined function, that is related to library functions or a built-in function, it is mandatory to have this header file. Okay, so now we'll see what are the header file we have. Already we have discussed regarding the #include iostream.h and #include con.io.h. So those two header files are familiar with you guys. So here we are going to learn about some of the header file, and each header file is used to perform, or each header file will going to perform some of the particular operation. And if I am including XYZ header file, then it will going to comprises of number of library functions. So when we are using that header file, then there will be a privileges of using that functions in our program. So we'll see the first header file, that is iostream.h. Already we all are familiar with this iostream.h header file. So as the name indicates, IO, that represent input output. So if I wanted to perform input and output operation in our program, then it is mandatory to have this iostream.h header file. So this header file contains C++ streams. So stream is nothing but it is a flow of information or a flow of data, and input output routines. So I bar O represents input or output. So if I wanted to perform any of the input or output operation in our program, then we have to include this iostream.h header file. So if I'm having this iostream.h header file in my program, then what are the functions we can include? It may comprises of open, close, get line, read, write, put, seek G, seek P, tell G, tell P, evof. Okay. So as of now, you just remember all these names which is related to this iostream.h header file. So if I just wanted to explain about each keyword here. So each keyword has a specific meaning to the compiler. So here we have open, close. It is all related to file operations. So that we are going to learn in your second PUC. Okay. So if you wanted to have this, all these functions in your program, then it is mandatory to have this iostream.h header file. So we'll see the next one, that is stdio.h, that is standard input output header file. Why we are going to use this? So when I'm including this iostream.h, so in that only it will going to include this stdio.h header file as well. If I'm using iostream.h, so within that only this stdio.h will going to be incorporated. Then what is the use of having this stdio.h? Mainly this header file contains the functions and macros to perform standard input-output operations. So when we are performing standard input and output operation, then it is mandatory to have this standard io.h header file. Then what are the function which is related to this header file? So you can see that F open, F close. So here F indicates file. File open, file close, and we have a printf scanf. So you can see this printf and scanf in the C programming. There we are going to use printf in order to display the statement, scanf in order to take the input for the variable. Then F printf, and we have a F scanf fread, fwrite. So if these functions are needs to be used in our program, then we have to include this standard io.h header file, that is standard input output header file. So if I am incorporating this iostream.h, by default this stdio.h will going to be included in the program or within the compiler. We'll see the next one, that is string.h. So as we all know that if you just recall the data types, so there we have character, right? So character is nothing but that is a single letter or a single character. So if I wanted to have sequence of character, then we have to use string. So there is no data type called string in the C++, but if I wanted to have, then I have to take array of string. But what if I wanted to perform any function which is related to string? So you just understand one thing. So this is character. Okay, this is single letter, it is termed as character, and I have one more character called B. But what if I wanted to have both together? So then I am going to call that as a string. String is nothing but sequence of character, sequence of character. And if I wanted to perform some of the operation which is related to the string, then it is mandatory to have this string.h header file. And it is important topic, and in my coming session you are going to learn about this string.h header file as well as the functions of each this string.h header file. So these header files declare the function in order to manipulate the strings. So now we got to know that what is string. It is a stream of character. I wanted to manipulate that string. I just wanted to perform some of the operation over that string. Then we have to include this string.h header file, and it will going to manipulate the memory routines. So this string.h header file comprises of these many function that includes string length, string concatenation, string copy, string comparison, and we have a string reverse, string upper, string lower. Okay, so these are all the some of the function which is related to string operations. So if I wanted to perform that, it is mandatory to have this string.h header file. So here you can see the list of string operation, and I am going to discuss in the coming session. So after this we have stdlib.h. std is nothing but standard and lib is nothing but library, standard library function. Then what is the use of having this standard library function in our program? We'll see now. So this header file is used to declare conversion routine, search or sort routines and other miscellaneous things. If I just wanted to perform the operation, or if we wanted to manipulate something which is related to the memory, if I just wanted to convert the memory space of an array into some of the other data types, or if I just wanted to do any of the searching or sorting operations in our program, then we are going to use this standard library header file. Okay, so if you just recall exit of 0 function, that is also related to this standard library function itself. So here you can see the sum of the conversion, A to I, A to L, and here we have A to F, free. Free is nothing but we are going to deallocate the memory space which is allocated, and we have a M alloc, C alloc, and we have a realloc. So these are all the function which comes under this standard library. So for another thing, we can also use this exit function. So if I wanted to use this exit function, already we have discussed regarding this exit function in the control statements. So if I wanted to have this in my program, then it is necessary to have this standard library header file in the program. So next we have iomanip.h. As the name indicates, manip, that indicates that manipulation purpose. If I wanted to do some of the modification to the input and output operations, or if I wanted to modify the content of input and output in our program, then we are going to have this iomanip.h header file. So that is what manip is nothing but manipulation. So this header file contains the functions and macros. So macros is nothing but set of sequence of code which is going to perform a particular task. For IO manipulators, so if I wanted to do some manipulation related to the input as well as the output, for creating the parameterized manipulation, for that purpose we are going to use this iomanip.h. So let me consider, already all are familiar with the arrays. So instead of arrays, I just wanted to take a matrices. So for example, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So this is elements of an matrices. I can also write like this, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. So can I call this as a matrices? Matrices is nothing but what? Collection of rows and column. So here instead of having this, I can make it as user friendly. That is what? By using some of the input output operator or input output manipulation operation, I can make it user friendly. So if I just look into that output, I have to get to know what is the things which is happening. So for that purpose, we are going to use this manipulator. Instead of writing like this, I am going to write 1, 2, 3, 4. That is what? Some of the elements of a matrices. Then how it is possible to do this manipulation? What should I do in order to come to the next line? What should I do in order to end the line? So if I wanted to do some of the manipulation related to the input and output operator or input and output operation, then we are going to have this iomanip.h header file. So this function will going to include endl, that represents end of a line. For example, cout double quotes A and I have cout B. Okay. So what will be the output for this one? If I consider this as the output screen, what will be the output? It will be like A, B. But I have written in a different line. I have written in an independent line. But I just forgot to mention the endl. That means what? If I wanted to have a line space between one cout statement to another cout statement, then I have to include this endl manipulator. If I am using this, what will be the output for that? Then it will be like this. The output will be like this by using this endl. If I am using this endl in my program, then I have to include this iomanip.h header file. Okay, that is what related to this IO manipulation. And we have a set W that represents the set width. What must be the space between one value to another value? For example, if I just wanted to display 1, 2, 3, 4 and I wanted to display like this. Okay, so there is some equal space between 1 to 3, but I wanted to give 2 space between 4 and 5. So at that time we have to use this set W in order to give a width between the values that we are going to print on the output screen. And we have a set file, set precision, hex and octal. Okay, so here set precision is nothing but, for example, if you just wanted to show the salary of an employee, at that time after the dot, how many values should be displayed? For example, 35,000.00 after that, or 35,750.1240. So if you wanted to have number of precision, then that can also be defined with the help of this set precision. If you are having any one of these function in your program, then you have to include this iomanip.h header file. Okay, so we'll see the next one, that is math.h. As the name indicates, math is nothing but that is related to mathematical operations. So if I wanted to perform any of the mathematical operation, then we have to include this math.h header file. So this header file declares the prototypes for the mathematical functions. If I wanted to perform any mathematical operations or a calculation, then we have to include this math.h header file, and it will going to handle the error, because without error only we can run the program, or successful execution of a program will going to be takes place only there is no errors. So if I wanted to handle some of the error, and if you wanted to perform any of the operation which is related to the mathematical calculation or operation, then it has to have this math.h header file. So you just imagine, I just wanted to find a power of this number. Okay, so how I am supposed to do? So that is what, 2 into 2 into 2. So then it will going to return 8. That is what, 2 2s are 4, 4 2s are 8. Then it will going to return 8. So I have to write this in my program, right? If I wanted to find any of the power of a given number, then I have to write this code. So instead of writing the calculations, or instead of writing the code for this calculation, we can simply will going to use the function which is already available. For example, instead of writing this code, I have a mathematical function called power that represents the power. For example, 2, 3. So that is nothing but 2 power 3. Whatever the operation that we are going to do by writing this calculation will going to be done by this power function. So, which is more convenient here, whether this one or this one? So, this looks so convenient instead of writing the code for each variable or each value. So, that is what the usage of having this function. So, here I have listed out some of the mathematical function in order to do the mathematical calculations or operation. So, here it will going to have a square root. So, if I wanted to find a square root of any numbers, for that I may require n number of lines of code. So, instead of writing all those code from the scratch, we can simply have this square root function. So, here x represents the number. For example, if I am going to include sqrt of 2, then it will going to send me the square root of 2. Okay, and I have already discussed regarding the pow and this sine, cosecant, tan, and a sine, cos, exponential, log, logarithm which is base 10, and absolute function, fabs. So, if I wanted to use any of these functions, then we have to include the math.h header file in our program. I hope you all understood with my today's session. So, in the coming session, we will be discussing regarding the character function. So, already I have told you character is nothing but single character. So, that may comprises of any of the things. It may be related to alphabets, numbers, or any symbols. That is what character. So, if I wanted to do some of the operations, or if we are performing some of the function which is related to character, then that will be my next session content, as well as we are going to learn about this string function. Sequence of character is nothing but string. And in my next session, we are going to learn about character function as well as the string functions. It's all about today's session. Let me meet you in the next session with a continuation of this chapter itself. Until that, keep learning, keep on growing. Thank you.